Welcome to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset, the leading data and analytics company for the cannabis industry.
Welcome back to the High Rise, where we talk all things cannabis, from U.S. MSOs, Canadian LPs, products, and market analysis through the lens of data. My name is Cy Scott with Headset, and I am joined, as always, by Emily Paxia of Poseidon.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the High Rise.
Well, it's great to be back and kind of back to our, traditional recording format off of the Twitter Spaces.
Yes, the Twitter Spaces. But that was a really fun experience to be live and have folks kind of tuning in and to see who's tuning in, because we can't always see that while we're, once we see the downloads of the podcast. But it was fun to see who was chiming in, and I think we'll keep refining that process and doing it accordingly when we have great guests like Jason on.
Totally. And thanks to everyone who may be listening who were there. Yeah, a great experience. It's great to see all the listeners coming through. And yeah, it's a new format. We're figuring it out. I think there's a lot of cool things we can do. I mean, it's great to be in the conversation while it's happening versus, listening to it after the fact. Yeah. But, I know there's like paths to have audience participation, things like that. So lots of things we want to kind of continue to experiment with. I think right now we're talking about really focusing around guests, and if we can do it with the guests at the same time. But yeah, we're testing it out. So far, so good.
Yeah, it was actually, for those who don't know, this was born out of a little pilot program we did on Clubhouse last year. And we were really frustrated because we were doing the Clubhouse hangouts, and then we thought, well, we're spending time preparing for this, and we had people who would tune in live, and then other folks would reach out to us and say, we wish we could have been there. Do you have a recording? But Clubhouse was limited in its technical capabilities to allow us to do that, and that's when we decided to create the podcast. But now we can do the podcast and Twitter Spaces live, and so it's kind of it's coming full circle to the capabilities we'd hoped Clubhouse would have provided. But this is even better.
Yeah, it's like everything old is new again. So
yes.
right back to where we started. But yeah, having the ability to record is important. So yeah, really, really cool new kind of channel for the High Rise. So more to come there. But today, let's talk about news. We've got a lot of interesting things to cover from, well, I guess it's a lot around legislation, really. So why don't we start there? First thing I want to start with is this latest article from Will Yakowitz on Congresswoman Nancy Mace's States Reform Act receiving backing from Amazon.
Yeah, this was a really big deal because it's funny, on this podcast with Will Yakowitz, we spoke about the concept of strange bedfellows pushing this industry forward. And
that's right.
Yeah, and we were talking about, I think it was actually when the Koch brothers really leaned in and Amazon was getting involved. And these are groups that we would never have originally anticipated would be the agents of change and progress around cannabis. But I did learn in my early days on the board of Marijuana Policy Project that you do try to lean in on groups that maybe weren't on the face of it the biggest supporters of cannabis, because that's where you can really shake up change. A lot of us kind of work in an echo chamber around being pro-cannabis reform. But if you can break out of that echo chamber and get into these different circles of influence and spheres of influence, maybe you can have change. And I think having a massive company like Amazon really leaning in on this, I think is really something. And also Nancy Mace, Representative Mace, who is a Republican, which is something we've also talked about, is the bipartisan nature of this issue. So it's great to see this coming together this way.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know, this was announced a while ago, but just to kind of see it continue to get some traction out there with organizations like Amazon is huge, bringing it back up to the top of everyone's mind share, as we're thinking about what does legalization look like, in 2022 and beyond. There's a great quote at the start of the article, and it's published on Forbes if you want to, look it up. But the quote from Congresswoman Mace is that there's a million reasons to end federal prohibition, and the only place where this is controversial is up here. Up here meaning Washington, D.C. Says it's an enormously popular idea. America is like, WTF, D.C., why have you not done this yet? And it's... Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's true. It's very much telling it like it is, right? It's crazy. I think maybe we are in a bit of a bubble in our worlds that we're in, but anybody I talk to about it, I get asked that all the time. Like, why isn't it legal everywhere? Like, what's going on? And I just point to, just federal government, they can't get anything done, right? It's just, all this partisanship, these challenges, and nothing's happening. But to your point, Republican, strange bedfellows, like we've said it before, it's, this is like not a partisan issue anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, are we an explicit show? Because I was going to say it's very nice that she said WTF instead of what we're all really saying about it.
I know. I'm just reading the quote exactly as she put it.
I think she handled it very well, because I could say we'd have to probably bleep out all of the things I have to say about why it's not getting done on the federal level. But I think it's true. It's become a common sense issue, and it just feels like it's being held hostage, and the wrong people are suffering at the hands of it. But I'm excited to see this. And, the reality of it is that when industry groups want to see a change at the federal level or even at the state level, you have to have resources. And in the instance of policy change, it really is money. And who has more money available to them than a group like Amazon and the Koch brothers? I mean, it's the reality. We need to have resources behind this. We've been under spending as an industry in this area. Really, when you look at who else could we talk about this, like who's at the table? Pharma, tobacco, wine and spirits, all of them spend a lot at the government level. And so now we see resources here.
Yeah, totally. And, I think it's pretty obvious that Amazon doesn't want to get into the sale of cannabis, at least not in the foreseeable future, 10, 20 plus years, maybe, in a world where it's completely normalized, maybe, but not tomorrow. And, this is not a 20-year outlook for them. It's really about the jobs. It's really about hiring people. And Amazon has the needs, like, to have so many employees. I think the latest numbers I've seen out there were just under 1 million employees? Something like one out of every 150 American workers is an Amazon employee at this point. Mm-hmm. And they still need more, right?
They still need more, and they identified rightly that there are whole sections of the population that they can't hire because of the situation with federal cannabis issues. And so I think it's really smart, because I think they're recognizing that that's a talent pool that is just egregiously being targeted and they can't tap. And, I just learned the other day that, for example, during the holiday rush, Amazon was paying $3,000 bonuses for hourly wage workers to come on during that time. I mean, the employment crisis in this country, getting people to work, is harder than ever and more expensive than ever. And yet there are a lot of folks who would love to work who are limited because of things like cannabis laws. So I think it's smart. And I was glad they articulated why, because immediately yesterday, of course, I saw things exploded, and it was like Amazon's going to get into, cannabis marketplace. And we've even joked, because, I've seen the pitch, like the Amazon of cannabis, and we made the joke, like, well, maybe Amazon's the Amazon of cannabis. But, I think their point is not today, not even in the near term, but the first problem we have is people. And so let's resolve that. And, the way we talk about it here is that's a great reason. I can't get behind a better reason. So go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does it. And in her estimation, looks like it opens up the pool of candidates by about 10% for Amazon, which is a big number when you're dealing, with millions. So, really good to have these kind of resources backing this bill. Maybe we'll see something, happen. We'll certainly continue to watch it. Yeah, just exciting. Great article. Definitely take a look. And we are working on scheduling Congresswoman Mace for a high rise, hopefully next week. So The next episode you may be hearing is our interview with her. We can kind of get some of this information direct from the Congresswoman.
Yeah, we are really excited. They said they're interested and committed to coming on. So we're just nailing down the time and date. And I would love to hear some, really some of the details around how she started really becoming attuned to this issue and leaning in on it. So very excited, and also just grateful that they're interested in joining us. I think it means they really are taking this seriously. So
yeah, exactly. And, this may have some traction. We talk a lot about these different kind of bills that land at the federal level, but, there might be something here. At least I'm hopeful. So more to come on that next week. And yeah, really exciting to see where this may go. Well, let's continue to talk about legislation but more on the state level. So today, some big news. Marijuana Moment is reporting that a few states have made some changes, particularly, I guess, their committee votes to legalize medical cannabis. And those states are Delaware and Wisconsin.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah. Actually, I believe Delaware might be adult use. I think that's
Is that
right.
what's happening?
Yeah.
All I can think of is Wayne's World. Hi, I'm in Delaware. I mean, it's a very tax efficient state, so I'm very happy for them to be getting this. I think it is adult use.
Yeah, I think so. This stuff is all hot off the presses as we're recording this, so we're just kind of getting in front of it. But yeah, it's a big deal. Looks like it just cleared its first legislative hurdle, 10-4, coming out of a committee, which means that it still needs to get through the legislature from there. So another vote, but one of the most important, or the first hurdle is done, which is huge. Delaware's governor, a Democratic governor, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but not particularly a big fan of cannabis, which is unfortunate. I have a quote here from earlier, I guess last year, where, when they first started talking about this stuff, and he says, look, I just don't think it's a good idea. He said, adding that when he was served as lieutenant governor, he spent years trying to convince Delawareans to live a healthier lifestyle, and he feels marijuana use does not fit into that effort. This is, such a frustrating thing, right? When, you're talking about healthier lifestyles and kind of the misinformation or the stigma associated with that, and like these perceptions that you can't lead a healthy lifestyle and be a consumer of cannabis. It's crazy. I mean, you have all the experience, Emily, working with Athletes for Care and, firsthand hearing from them about, these are people that are like the epitome of healthy lifestyles that can balance it. So this argument, I don't know, it's quite frustrating to hear.
It's very frustrating, and it's just ill-informed because, as we know, alcohol is far worse for health than cannabis. I mean, cannabis has positive health effects, too. I mean, obviously, we all know if you smoke something, you light it on fire, it has a different impact, but cannabis itself is better for you than alcohol. In fact, I'm just looking at the leading causes of death in Delaware, and number 2 is heart disease, and number 4 is stroke. Both of those things are affiliated with, smoking cigarettes and or alcohol. So there you go. Something to think about.
Yeah, and he followed on that quote with a statement saying, we spend all this time and money to get people to stop smoking cigarettes, and now we want to say it's okay to just smoke marijuana recreationally. Look, I don't want to sound like a prude about it. I just don't think it's a good idea.
Well, you do sound like a prude, okay? So there you go. Sorry.
Yeah, and smoking, while flower is the most popular category, you can do a lot with flower. You don't have to smoke it, right? Yes. You can extract it, put it into an edible. You can vaporize it, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be smoking. It's not necessarily associated with smoking. Not to say that doesn't happen, but there are ways to consume cannabis that are not smoking. So a little frustrating. You'd think, in a state like this that's looking at legalization, it would do his homework a little bit on this stuff. But I think the risk here is that it does get through, state legislation, and then, he has a potential to veto it, which would be...
Yeah. Well, someone better get in there and start talking to him. It's interesting about where, and you're absolutely right, Si. I was thinking about this the other day when I was talking about the flower category, and someone was like, well, what rate or what's the percentage of people who vape versus smoke flower? And I was like, it's an actually interesting question, and it's hard to know to ascertain that. But there are lots of devices now around vaping flower. And in fact, the primary way I consume flower at home is with my packs too. From a vaping standpoint, it's actually a really great way because you can taste the terpenes really well and when you vape it instead of smoke it. So I don't know, it's just my 2 cents. But I think there's so many form factors now. And just when I look at Delaware is funny. It's a small but a mighty state because of the way it's positioned itself with business. And, it sits right in this interesting like little armpit of, Pennsylvania and Maryland, and you have medical markets on either side. And so if you spring into an adult use market, you could see some really interesting dynamics there. So
yeah, definitely. The population's like about 1 million, just under 1 million people. I mean, one of the lowest populated states. It's obviously a very small state.
It's the size of Fresno for anyone who's interested in
Is Fresno about 1 million residents?
1 million people. I was shocked to learn that Fresno is that much bigger than San Francisco as a population.
Amazing.
Basis. Yeah.
Amazing. So estimated to generate about $200 million in sales, according to, our headset analysis in 2025, assuming legalization. And they're saying, 45 million in revenues for the state is what they're expecting from tax revenues. That's pretty significant. Obviously, there's so much between now and then, like as far as rolling it out and what it might look like. But I believe it has quite a bit, kind of already defined in the legislation that they're looking at, things like social equity and so on.
Here's the thing. Philadelphia is not far. So if you look at, for example, in Southwest Illinois, which is adjacent to St. Louis, for example, when adult use opened in Illinois, the doors that were closer to St. Louis really cranked. I don't know. I wouldn't sleep on this little ticket. I think it's going to be interesting. Go Delaware.
Go Delaware. Yeah, I mean, I'm looking. Yeah, you're right. Philadelphia is right there.
Look at that. It's a bedroom community. The whole state of Delaware is a bedroom community to Philadelphia. And the Delaware Shore, I understand, is a lovely place to summer. So you just never know. This could get really interesting. But importantly, too, though, I think it's things like this that start to, when you're building adult use markets around markets, like now Pennsylvania's got New Jersey, Delaware. I mean, it's a flex.
Right. Yep. And Baltimore is right there too. Maryland's got its medical market, but still, it's an easy drive. Yeah, maybe Speaking Wayne's World was onto something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like, what do they say? I think about 30 retail locations after the 19 months after the bill's enactment, which is, I love these timelines. Like we were talking last week about New Jersey, 5 months, 6 months. Did we say 6 months? We meant a year or whatever.
We meant 2 years.
I don't know why 19 months, that's such a weird number, but anyways, 30 retailer licenses for 1 million people. I'm not sure on a per capita how that fits with other adult use, but probably pretty reasonable.
I think just to use Fresno, they just are opening doors there. And I think there's 6 licenses to start, somewhere around there.
So good. So that's pretty good. 5 times that then already.
Yeah.
Is, what they're proposing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder what Philly's population is. Anyway, so that's happening.
And this, Delaware is Biden's backyard, right? He represented Delaware for 30 years in Congress, some insane amount of time. It's frustrating, but I feel like he's more aligned with Carney, the governor, on his opinion. But maybe, hey, he sees these stores sees, this is what his constituents want. Maybe the rest of the country wants this too. Maybe it'll open his eyes a little bit.
I like your optimism.
I know, right? It can only be.
I mean, people are just literally missing the memo, but that's okay. It's just at this point willful ignorance about the constituents' demand for legalized cannabis, so it's fine.
Yeah. Well, it'll be, I just love this idea. 19 months from now, he's going to go back to Delaware to hang out in the Delaware Shore, and he's just surrounded by cannabis retail. And everyone driving in from Philadelphia and Baltimore.
All of a sudden, Delaware is a super rich state. It's going to be great.
Right.
In 19 months. Good for them.
So, when it passes the legislation, it still has to get through, the state legislature. I think it just got through the committee, but still, within a couple years, stores open. And we see some sales. So fingers crossed.
We always said this is a state-to-state game. So take it.
And the numbers are running out. So Wisconsin's the other one today. So Wisconsin, the headline, again on Marijuana Moment, which if you're not checking that or subscribed, highly recommended. They're unbelievably on top of this stuff.
Yes.
I've been a Patreon supporter a long time of theirs, and I don't know how they do it, but they're the first to be on these things. And Wisconsin, Republicans announced limited medical marijuana legalization bill is the headline over there. So, Republicans specifically. Wisconsin is one of the few remaining states that just doesn't have a comprehensive medical legislation. So it sounds like it's on the way.
It is on the way. Oh, Wisconsin, they're going to make it happen, but it's looking very limited, but baby steps, especially for a market like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right on the limited side. It's, speaking of smoking, it looks like it's going to prohibit smokable marijuana products. The stigma against we can't sell flower, everyone's going to smoke it. Maybe I understand pre-rolls, things like that. But anyways, no smokable marijuana products. Doesn't allow patients to grow cannabis for personal use. And it's going to be oils, pills, tinctures, topicals, but yeah, baby steps, I guess. But at least there's going to be some framework.
Yeah. I mean, if they're even prioritizing to have this level of discussion, it's just good progress in terms of sentiment. So that's
and I was looking at the marijuana policy project on this stuff, just like how many states are left? How many states do they need to focus on? And just kind of getting some background. And they reported that, Wisconsin, the GOP caucus, they say, is drastically out of step with voters. In November 2018, which is forever ago, around 1 million Wisconsin voters approved advisory questions on their ballots calling for more humane cannabis laws. And then more than half of Wisconsin's population saw cannabis-related measures on their ballot in 2018, and every single one of the measures passed. And 2018, I mean, that's an eternity at this point in cannabis years, right? And so, they're just finally, getting something going, but you're right, they're joining their neighbors, right? You've got Illinois, you've got Michigan, you've got these markets all around them that have some framework.
That's like 3 bear markets ago for cannabis. Yeah, it's an interesting market from a politics standpoint too. Just when you see where it sits in kind of the electoral situation, they've had some real voter issues. So, but I'm happy for them,
Yeah, it's something. Yeah. It's a start. And it's one more off the list, right?
It's one more off the list.
Yeah, and I looked up the list because, the way things move here, it's hard to keep track of who doesn't have, a robust or a comprehensive medical program. And the MPP identifies, I think it's 14 of them.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin is one of those 14.
Yes.
But includes states like Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, and Texas, these states do have some medical program, but I think they're just not defined as comprehensive, according to MPP. They're very limited, very, very limited, like CBD oil type stuff.
Yeah, super limited. But Wisconsin, you do have Milwaukee and Madison, of course, go Badgers, the massive university there. And I think that could be an awesome little hub for a cannabis center. So we'll see. I'm excited. Any progress is progress at this point, I think. And again, state to state. We'll take it state to state.
I love 2 states in one day, the middle of a week, late January, talking about cannabis legalization. Yeah. So that's huge. It's huge. So 14 states, keep chipping away at these. There's one more to, off that list. Pretty soon there's going to be 0. And then what kind of upside down world do we live in without a federal change at that point?
Right. That's right. And then to that end, speaking of limited markets, New York was incredibly, incredibly limited, as we've been talking about. And one of the things we've discussed here on the High Rise was what's going to happen as it marches toward legalization, hopefully in the beginning of 2023. And one of the things we talked about was, would they open up the medical program? And just this week, we saw terrific news on Monday where they basically said that doctors can prescribe cannabis for whatever conditions they deem it fitting for. So I think this is really good news for the patients who've really suffered at the hands of a really limited market around the condition set, but also around to your point, the form factor and probably also the quality of the cannabis they were able to access. Now the operators who are there with infrastructure can actually lean in a bit more on supplying broader uses in this market and more potential market share. So I think they'll probably do a better job in terms of leaning in on the products they're bringing to market. Because before it was so tough. I don't think they were putting as much energy into it as probably they will now. So I think this is a great step. And I do have friends with severe medical conditions in the state of New York who found the program to be really disappointing. Conditions like MS, like very serious things. And I think this is a great step for just making it more accessible for the rest of the people who would like to have it. And like I said, hopefully better quality products.
Yeah, certainly for those patients, this is huge. And for the businesses, the dispensaries that are there, I mean, New York has been, I guess, really thought about like what's the most underwhelming market, but probably the New York medical market. I remember when, they legalized and, it was a milestone watershed moment to talk about it. I think, at Leafly at the time, we ran an ad in the New York Times talking about, how great it is with like New York in the background, people walking around and thinking about cannabis or whatever. And that was forever ago. And the program just really didn't get the patient count. And probably for all those reasons, restrictions on what doctors could recommend for, and then the quality of products, the types of cannabis that they were able to sell. The numbers have just been terribly low, right, for the population of New York. So I don't think it has been successful. I think it's been one of those, they checked the box and said, yeah, we have a medical program. But now with adult use on the horizon and, it's everywhere there. So like, why not open it up a little bit? And it sounds like they finally did. So that's great. We should start seeing hopefully larger patient counts pretty quickly here now that it's more opened up. Like this whole, any condition that they feel can be treated by cannabis is very much a California type language. I remember when California, has the list and then it had that at the end, or anything that the physician feels like they could benefit from. So it should open it up. We should see more people going into that program, which is great because California adult use, the structure there, I mean, we're looking at 2023 at this point, with just the pace of things like New Jersey that we talked about last week. There's no way we're going to see New York this year. So this might help, kind of get things going, make cannabis a little more accessible in the interim.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Huge.
Come on, New York.
Only took, how long has it been? Over 4 years, right?
Yeah, at least, because I was still on the marijuana policy project when they were getting the medical program going. So
it's been a long time. And then just flower was the tail end of last year, because we just covered that on the podcast. So yeah, it's a long time coming, but great to see, because they could easily just say, well, we got our adult use program. Why bother talking about this? We're focused on this. So the fact that they're giving it some attention, I think is pretty great to see.
I think so too. And I think we're going to have Nick, the CEO of Columbia Care, on in a couple of weeks to talk about their point of view, because they've been there forever. I remember when I was staying in Brooklyn for a couple of summers running by their dispensary. Great location, actually, right by City Hall there in downtown Brooklyn. And then I know they have a very significant cultivation project out in Long Island. So there are other operators also, of course, who are leaning in on the state, but I thought it'd be fun to hear from someone new and different.
Yeah, totally. It'd be great to get his opinion on this stuff and how it's going to impact, what's going on in New York for them. Definitely. All right. Well, beyond legislation, a little bit on MSO news. Kind of the big headline over the last week was that Curaleaf is moving even more into Arizona with their acquisition of the Bloom dispensaries for $211 million. It brings their retail footprint in Arizona up to 13 dispensaries and 121 nationwide, which I think might be the most. Maybe Trulieve with Harvest. I don't know. It's hard to keep track of these numbers. 121 is pretty serious.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the theme when we talk about Curaleaf is like go bigly or go home. So, and they have a big presence. We were talking about this in the pre-show. They have a big presence in Florida, and Arizona's the Florida of the Southwest. So it's a very good setup for them. I mean, it's just in terms of when you look at population, golf, sunshine, it's all very, very fluid like that. But I think it's a very interesting market. We really like the Arizona market. And talk about, how about this? Kudos. I think it's the only time I will ever say to a state, you did a great job opening your adult use market ahead of schedule. How's that?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
That was amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, Arizona, it's always been pretty good. They had a period of time ages ago with this like collective structure and the medical dispensary licenses, and there was some challenges there, but since that got sorted, I think the medical framework has been pretty solid, and then now into adult use, and the numbers are good. Like looking at December sales data and Headset for Arizona, 193 million, right? This is pre-tax dollars. That's pretty substantial, and that's up 6% from where Arizona was in November. So, a good growing market for the population size. So certainly they've done a good job, and I think that's being recognized by operators like Curaleaf, making acquisitions like this, like Trulieve and Harvest, coming in. And I think, a lot of states can look to Arizona and maybe learn something.
Yeah, and you're right. Arizona, it was 2016 when 8 of the 9 state initiatives passed, right? And Arizona was the only one that didn't. And it was interesting because I was involved in Marijuana Policy Project at that time. We were actually most worried about Nevada not passing because Sheldon Adelson was so opposed to it. And he was putting
the media out there, right?
And then what we found out happened in Arizona was it was a pharmaceutical company that was funding the opposition and put a lot of money into it. And by the way, it was an opioid company.
Oh, wow.
Because as we all know, in markets where cannabis legalization occurs, opiate addictions tend to decline. So it's not good for their business. But it seemed like Arizona quickly corrected from that and got right on track. And then once they voted for it, they got their market open, lickety split. And then it's like that, like be like Arizona, don't be like Murphy in New Jersey. Get it open.
Yeah. That's interesting about the pharma company. I do remember back then as well, it was Discount Tire too. So the Discount Tire company.
What?
Or it's, true story. You can look it up. Bruce Hal, their billionaire owner, made $1 million donation to defeat Prop 205. So a lot of opposition at the time. I don't know where, I don't remember 2016, exactly why was anti. I'm sure it has to do with labor, workforce, maybe, but Amazon's the opposite. Yeah,
I don't know.
Could be that.
I don't smell anything rational. If I'm a tire guy, I'm like, what do I give a shit? Just like buy my cars, buy the cars, get the tires. I don't know. It feels like when fast food restaurants weigh in on gay rights or
Right. I know they just got money to throw around, but for whatever reason, I remember I remember it because it was so strange, right? Why is a tire company against cannabis legalization? But yeah, you're right. A little bit of a speed bump on the way to legalization, and it's just like the march of progress, the inevitability of this stuff, right? So it's going to end up this way everywhere, even when things get slowed down from time to time. So
it's true. I think it was Insys was the company.
Yeah, interesting.
Based in Chandler, Arizona, it was. Yeah. Anyway, talk about two strange bedfellows, a tire company and a pharmaceutical company.
On the wrong side of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, well.
Didn't work out super well for either of them.
No.
Arizona's thriving. So
yes.
Yeah. Well, apart from that, on the MSO side, I know earnings season is getting here, probably.
Yes.
We know March 7th, Curaleaf is going to be talking numbers, and any other dates? I think the others are kind of to be announced.
March 1st is GTI. So
great.
GTI tends to be one of the first always. I think they just like to be early often on your earnings, get it out there. So they'll be out there. So, and then everyone seems to fill in between. But we haven't seen the other announcements yet. Oh, another thing of note that I forgot to mention was, speaking of Arizona, Florida, and everything, Barron's did, if anyone's interested in reading up on it, they did a big article on TrueLeaf. And also just on the state of the cannabis market. But so that's cool. It's cool to see Barron's picking up more coverage of the industry. They have written about other operators in the space, but this just hit this morning, I think.
Oh, very cool. I haven't seen it myself.
Yeah. So that was going on. But we'll keep you all posted on the earnings calendar. And I think we'll bring our good friend Matt McGinley back on because he's one of our faves. But, there's a lot of good folks in the space, but he's a really in-depth analyst on things, and we always appreciate him sharing his opinion with us. So
yeah, he's really good at what he does and looks at this stuff pretty closely. So it's great to have him on the show to kind of cover this stuff. So that's all coming up. It sounds crazy to say that March is coming up. I mean, we're here at the tail end of January. I think it's February next week.
It is.
Yeah. So
what the hell?
What the hell? I know 2022 is off to a raging start here. So that'll be right around the corner. We'll keep everyone posted on those dates because those shows are always fun. So more to come. But I think that'll do it for this week's episode. Thanks so much, as always, for listening. And if you're enjoying the show, be sure you subscribe in your favorite podcast service. And always helpful if you leave us a rating. And fingers crossed, next week we'll have Congresswoman Nancy Mace on to talk more about the States Reform Act and what's going on, or I should say WTF, DC.
Good one.
Yeah. We'll see y'all next week.
Thanks for listening to the High Rise Podcast, presented by Headset. For more information on Headset, visit headset.io.